Welcome to the Daily Swole.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 21 of the Daily Mother Swole. Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining on Periscope. Thank you for joining on Busker. Thank you for listening in on SoundCloud, iTunes, and checking me out here on YouTube. Today, talking about keeping your posture game good as F. AF, you know what I'm talking about. Let's get into the show and discuss posture. You know you're supposed to sit up straight in your chair and your mom corrects you and, sit up when you're eating at the table, blah, blah, blah. What is posture? What does it mean? And why is it important in your fitness? Why is it important in your life? Good posture, or posture in general, is just the alignment of joints. Your joints and your body is being pulled into earth by gravity. Posture is the alignment of all those joints, kind of like the game of Jenga. Now, I don't have Jenga with me, but you're familiar probably with all those little sticks and they're balanced perfectly. You pull out one at the bottom and everything all the way up has to change. You have to pull out stick after stick just to make sure that the alignment, the balance stays even. So what this means is if something changes at the bottom, if the balance changes at any point along the tower, then everything has to change around it. And this is what happens with posture when you have problems with the ankle, when you have problems with the hip, when you have problems from the bottom up, you're going to have changes above that issue and even below as well. So posture changes, static posture changes, and also dynamic posture. So there's two types of posture that keep your center of gravity in position and that keep you aligned if you are doing it properly. And of course, most of the time, people have poor posture, and we're going to get into the reasons, the pros and cons of doing certain things and how to correct poor posture and what poor posture actually means. So there's dynamic and there's static posture. Static posture is your posture when you're at rest, when you're not moving, when you're static. Dynamic posture is what your alignment is, what your posture is while you're in motion. So while you're running, while you're walking, while you're doing exercise. Dynamic posture is really important because not only are the alignment of your joints very, very essential to keeping you safe and to also performing the exercise properly and providing optimal muscle contraction, muscle force, lengthening of muscles of certain joints, and keeping everything in position and stacked the way it's supposed to. That posture is under load. That posture is under duress. That posture is being pressured by weights, pressured by acceleration, by gravity, by external forces. So this makes dynamic posture equally as important as static posture, but a little bit more risky if you're out of alignment. Some of the things that can affect posture: repetitive movement. Repetitive movement doesn't necessarily have to be movement. Now, this is a big misconception when someone says, repetitive movement patterns. Repetitive movement patterns just means repetitive patterns. Movement is optional. If you're sitting down at a desk, that's lack of movement, but that's still repetitive movement. That's a repetitive activity. It almost should be repetitive activity patterns because you can be immobile and sitting down in a hip flex position. And because you're sitting down, your glutes aren't firing, and then your hip flexors just get really stiff and brittle and tight. So this kind of, how should I say that, a seesaw effect creates a different tug of war around the joints and affects your lumbar posture, your thoracic posture, your cervical posture, and also affects your knee alignment, your valgus, which can cause more shearing, increase the angle of your Q angle, which is the angle of your femur from the hips, cause more pressure on the knees, and can cause flattening of the feet, can cause shin splints, can cause all sorts of issues. So your dynamic posture, your static posture can be affected by lack of movement or improper active movement. Usually, that active movement is affected as a result of that inactivity. So your injuries or your problems from poor dynamic posture is because of your immobility or what happens when you're at rest. So this is an interesting concept, again, when you're comparing dynamic and static posture, because someone might have decent posture while they're standing and then they start moving and that increased force, increased speed of movement, all of a sudden things come out of play. Because I've seen people that went slow and controlled, for example, in a squat, or did a test where the posture actually looked pretty good. A squat test looked pretty good. And all of a sudden you put weight on it, or they do a squat jump, and all of a sudden their knees buckle in, their toes go out, their feet flatten, and it's a whole big hot mess. So that is very important to understand, that sometimes when you increase the speed, when you increase the acceleration, when you increase the resistance, the force, the posture, the true imbalances come out, and that is what people do. That's where people get hurt. Not a lot of people get hurt just standing in position, right? So that movement creates that extra stress, and that can cause the problems. Some other things to think about. That lack of movement, not good. Improper movement, also not good. So we have inhibited glutes. We have the synergistic dominance, where the hamstrings start working too much. Talked about this the other day. When you have an imbalance with the glutes, we talked all about that ass in one of the earlier episodes a couple days ago. I think it was 19. That is a very important aspect. When the glutes shut down, when you're foam rolling, and I've done an episode on foam rolling, when you're doing inhibition, when you're putting pressure on the glutes, whether it's on a foam roller, whether you're sitting down, you're putting pressure, and neurally you're inhibiting the muscle. The muscle is inhibited, and then something else will take over. The glutes get shut down, the hamstrings start working harder, and the hip flexors are getting tight. So you have this kind of perfect storm, this conglomerate of improper balance in the joints. And that's going to affect your lower back. People that have chronic lower back pain, chronic neck pain, shoulder injuries, thoracic immobility, these are all things that result directly from improper movement patterns that lead to bad posture. Okay, both dynamic and static. Very rarely are you going to have amazing posture static, and then you're just a complete mess when you go into dynamic. But everyone's different, and sometimes certain movements will show or expound that a little bit more than others. So something to think about. Two major types of improper posture just with the spine: lordosis and kyphosis. Lordosis, also known as sway back, is when you have an excessive arch in your lower back, and that's really common with high heels. We talk about that booty pop. Elevating the heels is kind of like Jenga. When you're elevating the heels, you are forcing the hips to balance and to counteract that elevated heel. So when you wear sneakers, when you wear Nikes, Reebok, Adidas, anything with an elevated heel is going to affect your lower back posture, pressure on the lower back, and tightness in the front of the hips. Yeah? That's no good. That's no good. That's why I'm a fan of barefoot training. Again, another daily Swole, barefoot training number 2. That's old school. Back in the day, like 20 days ago, it wasn't that long ago, but back in the day, barefoot training, we went over that. What can you do? Oh, kyphosis. Kyphosis is rounded upper back, also known as Quasimodo syndrome. You've seen a lot of elderly people when they have degenerative discs or their intervertebral discs start failing. And you get a lot of this from sitting down at a computer. One of the reasons why I elevated my desk. If you're watching me live on Periscope or Busker, or you're seeing me on YouTube, you see I'm standing. And I got the triple monitor set up behind me. This is a standing desk. And it's not made to be a standing desk. I made it that way. I put it up on cinder blocks, gangster style, but now I'm standing and I don't have that hip flexion problem. So I am decreasing my risk. You can get standing desks, you can elevate your material. You do not have to be forced to sit down. It's not healthy to sit down. I'm walking around. You'd be surprised if you've never had a standing desk, how amazing it is just to walk up and just get to work. I start walking around the room more. I get more done because I'm actually mobile. I'll go and I'll clean some stuff up, and then I'll come back and I'll go get some water, and I walk back. It's amazing how I can just walk up to the desk and get to work, and I don't feel stuck. I don't have to flop back down. I don't feel stiff. I don't feel as tired. I feel a lot more alive being at a standing desk. So it's a huge difference, and I know some of you at your workplace, you might not be allowed to or have that ability, but I'm pretty sure if you talk to human resources, you could probably get it, especially if you have a doctor's note that you have back pain and things like that. Maybe you can get something worked out. And I would definitely encourage you to try a standing desk if you have the option, especially at home. If you do a lot of work at home, you bring your work home with you, I would recommend looking into a standing desk or just elevating the desk that you have. Just raise it up and make it comfortable so you don't have to strain while you're looking at it with your neck or with your hips. So 2 things that you can do if you have the most major compensation, which are the shoulder and the hip, where you have the anterior pelvic tilt, where you have the hips going forward and the butt popping back and the lower back arching. That's the most common. And also kyphosis, where you have the rounding of the upper back, or also known as upper cross syndrome. Two things you could do. For the hips, you got to stretch the hip flexors and activate the glutes. On my YouTube channel, I have a basic exercise called the supine hip bridge core activation. It's on YouTube. You can check that out, and that activates the glutes, and there are also hip flexor stretches and things of that nature that I'm going to be putting up on the videos. And I know I keep saying that. I got to do it. But stretching the front of the hips, do your yoga. If you do yoga, you'll get plenty of hip extension. And I keep on saying, do yoga, do yoga, do yoga. And you've heard me say this so many times. Make sure you do yoga. That will help balance out your body tremendously. Tremendously. I cannot stress how important, how effective yoga has been in my fitness and in my life, mentally and physically. So yoga, I'm just going to say yoga because that solves all the problems. Do your yoga. Stretch the hip flexors, activate the glutes. That's a pairing right there. Stretch the hip flexors, stretch the front, strengthen the back. Strengthen those booty cakes. Strengthen those wedding cakes. Get those coconuts popping. And for the upper body, stretching out the pectorals, stretching out the pec major and minor, and activating the rhomboids and the middle and lower trapezius. So things like doing scapular depressions and doing floor cobras are really effective. Again, when you do yoga, when you're doing your warrior one, when you're doing your crescent poses, when you're doing a lot of these positions, or even things like both those back bends, when you do yoga, you're activating all those muscles. You're stretching the front and you're activating those muscles on the posterior rotator cuff, the back of the shoulder, anything that does external rotation with the shoulder, super important because both the pecs and the lats, they get very tight from sitting down at computers, keeping your arms down, driving a car. They do internal rotation of the humerus and you get very, very tight in your upper body. Super, 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 super important. I cannot stress enough. You should be doing these every day anyway, but especially before you work out. Do them as like an activation, as like a warming up exercise. Okay? Stretch the front, stretch the hip flexors, stretch the pecs, strengthen the glutes, and strengthen the lower middle traps and the posterior rotator cuff. That is a really sharp rundown of posture. That's definitely not the be-all, end-all. We were just talking in terms of the sagittal plane, front to back. I'm not even going into side-to-side frontal plane. I'm not even going into transverse stuff. That's a whole other swole. That's a whole other issue. Okay? So if you have questions, start to think of them because we're about to do a Q&A. And I definitely want questions. If you try to stay on topic, ask about posture, ask about certain exercises. So get your questions ready. A couple things. I'm here every day at 12 noon Eastern time on Periscope and Busker. A lot of material on YouTube at Swolenormous. So check out those videos, questions, comments. A lot of times I've been doing, random periscoping. I've been doing random scopes. I've been doing random Q&As, doing a lot of stuff on Periscope, so you can set your alerts, and I'm on all random times of the night, so you might just want to turn that off at night because I do Q&A, I'm doing editing videos a lot of times, so I want you to make sure that you have questions, and I like to give a lot of opportunities to ask those questions so you can get those answers and get further towards your goal. Another thing, right now, today is Friday, happy Memorial Day weekend, everyone, America, okay? So big support of the troops. Big support of the troops, and I think you should be too. These are people that sacrifice and risk their lives to protect something without question. Okay? These are people that sacrifice everything, family, friends, and their time and their life, oftentimes their life, unfortunately, to support our right to do whatever the heck we want. Supporting my right to stand here in my living room and do a freaking podcast. So very, very, very big supporter of the troops in the military, and happy Memorial Day weekend. So what I'm also doing is these Kegel shirts that I still have. I know they're hilarious, but, okay, Kegel shirts, if you don't know what Kegels are, they're vaginal contractions. I think it's hilarious. I want people to be themselves. It's a great conversation starter. You'd be amazed at all the looks I get. It's hysterical, okay? And it says Swolenormous on the back. And I have men's shirts, and women's tanks. So one of the things I'm doing in combination, because I still have some left, and it was really successful the first time, I'm doing a special where if you purchase a shirt at swolenormous.com, you get a 15-minute fitness consultation included. So check it out. Swolenormous.com, men's t-shirts and women's tanks, and if for whatever reason I sell out of your size, I will give you an extended fitness consultation because that's the most important thing anyway. So Kegel shirts, men's tees, women's tanks, they're next level. They're really cool. They're really soft. And I still have some left, so I'd like to move them. And I think it would be great to show me some support and also a little bit of one-on-one time with me, FaceTime or Skype, where you'll get answers to all your questions directly, program design, nutritional guidance, whatever you need. Let's do a little bit of Q&A. Does anyone have any questions? Now, this is funny because I know I always ask for questions, and some people are like, I don't have any questions. That was really comprehensive. So I get that. I don't necessarily come up with the topics really long in advance, so I don't have a ton of emails about the questions, but I do have a couple things that people have been asking me, especially last night, in terms of the corrective exercises. So someone was asking me what the best exercise is for, the upper body. We're talking about the lower traps. We're talking about the middle trapezius. Talking about the upper body. Kyphosis was the question last night when I brought this topic up. Is it better to use bands or dumbbells? And that's a great question. A lot of times, dumbbells are effective, but they're different than bands. And this is a whole other episode talking about the difference between dumbbells and bands. Dumbbells are great because they allow any kind of range of motion, but you have to be in certain positions in order to activate those muscles against gravity properly. Bands you can do standing up, whereas dumbbells for certain exercise you can't. So for example, if you're watching, you could see when you're doing a cobra, you're grabbing from a high point and you're pulling down. I can do this standing up from a high pull with a band. Okay, that's great. I could pull down and pull my shoulders back and down, rotate my arms out to the side. That's with the band. If I had dumbbells, I could not do that. I wouldn't hit the right muscles because gravity is pulling straight down. I would have to be lying down on my stomach on a ball and something like that, or on a bench. And really, if you're trying to activate stabilizers, you don't want to be on a bench. You want to be in a position where you can balance. So bands can be very effective. If you travel a lot, bands are really good. So that's a great question. You can tie them in a door. You can hook them in a door. You can hook them around a pole. You can do them around a stairwell at your house. They don't weigh anything or next to nothing, and they're very portable. Okay, so that's a great, great question. How often should you do posture? How often should you do postural training? I would make it a point to add it into your routine as not only a warm-up, but a regular focused event. Now, if you're new to postural training, you're going to get very fatigued because these stabilizer muscles are very weak, which is why the posture is being affected. So when you're starting with postural training, start with every other day, go light, be careful going excessive with blasting these muscles because they fatigue quickly. And then if those muscles are weakened, it's going to affect your other training, or you can actually maybe put yourself at risk more for injury because those stabilizers, they're already weak, are now not only weak, but they're fatigued because you've been training them. So go light, go gentle, live to see another day, and then you can always go harder the next time. But some of these exercises like the cobras or the hip bridges could be something that you do not only every day, focused, but you can also do it as a warm-up to your training. Activate those muscles before leg day. Activate those muscles before you get on the Stairmaster, the step mill. Activate those muscles before you go for a walk. Activate those muscles before you do squats. Activate those muscles in your back before you do chest, before you do rows, and any kind of upper body or lower body training. So there should be a pattern. There should be a routine where you activate generally underactive or generally inhibited muscles, turn those on, and that will make sure that when you do your strength training acutely in that workout and then moving forward, you will be in safer, not only static, but dynamic posture, and you will be at least turning your body and putting your body in a better position to be safer. Good? Excellent. Thank you for joining the Posture Game episode of the Daily Swole. External rotation helped me out big time. External rotation is fantastic because everything else is internal rotation. So definitely good input gains. You got it. Thank you for joining me for episode 21 of the Daily Mother Swole. Still cracking. I'm getting older, but still gaining. So I hope you enjoyed watching me get larger live on camera. You can catch us every day at 12 noon Eastern time on Busker and Periscope. I'll see you mañana en la mañana, 12 noon Eastern time. Peace out.